Do
All
you want
right.
to start or do you want me to start?
Why don't you start?
Okay. Let me think.
Did you forget your lines?
No,
I'm,
I'm trying to think of the,
I'm,
there was one time in one of our short introductions where you thought like there was a long space and then I was kind of like quietly said it and you're like, oh, that's a different vibe, sort of like, and I like it was because I literally forgot what I was gonna say and I didn't admit, but I couldn't remember my line for the short intro. So
you couldn't remember the
I was
line.
like, I
I'm Dave
couldn't,
Pietraszewski.
no, I think it was by evolutionary, by
Oh,
actual
that's
evolution.
right.
I couldn't
Yeah.
remember the line by actual evolutionary psychologists. So I sort of, you were like,
Yeah.
so,
By evolutionary psychology
actual,
actuaries.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, no, so it was
Huh?
actual evolutionary psychology and then dot, dot, dot. And then I couldn't think of by actual evolutionary psychologists. So I just waited longer and longer. And then I kind of quietly said it because I like remembered it, but I didn't want to say that I had forgotten. I don't think we ever used that take, but maybe we can use this. So
Ma- Okay. Well, without further ado, this is Evolutionary Psychology, the podcast.
where I
Ac
will remember to say, well, yeah, you can say that part.
Actual evolutionary psychology.
By actual evolutionary psychologists. I can't
We
believe
nailed it.
I couldn't think of that. Nailed it. So yeah, excellent. Okay. So David, today we have a special guest, David Pinsof. Have you ever heard of him?
I've never heard of him. I don't know who
Okay.
he is.
Well, it's about it, the thing that was something called a joke, and what he's going to talk
Oh.
about is how humor is sort of about making mistakes, and why
Hmm.
that was sort of funny.
Okay. Well, I hope he explains why that was funny and gets to the bottom of it because I find it pretty puzzling.
Yeah, it may not have
So,
been that funny, but it was
yeah, or
medium.
maybe he'll explain why it wasn't funny.
Why it wasn't funny, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, well, but for real, this is a really cool episode where David explains his in still not even hot off the presses, like
Yeah.
preprint version of the theory of humor, which I
Yes.
think is really really amazing. And I certainly feel like I understand humor post digested by David. The world is a different place for me now that I've heard this theory of humor than before. So I hope everybody finds it useful and informative and slightly funny.
Yeah. I'm really excited about it. It's lovely to hear you say that, Dave. That's high praise. Yeah. So enjoy the mix-up theory of humor.
Sounds good. You can pay me once the music starts. David, today it's you and I and not anyone else.
I know it's been a long time since we've had one of these.
I know. And so I just can hear everybody hanging up their phone. Well, I guess you don't hear it when people turn their. So if you're looking for a guest, we're sorry to disappoint you. We should just cut all of this because it's a terrible way to start. So um, today we're going to talk about humor.
Hmm.
And usually when there's a talk about humor, I'm always expecting my first thought is like this talk better be funny. Um,
Hmm.
or and typically they're not. But you've been presenting on this. So can you tell me a little bit? So you have this idea about humor, and we'll talk about
Yeah,
it in a
yeah.
second. Um, Number one, what's the how did this tell me of the growth of this idea and where did it come from? And is this something you thought of like, a year ago or 10 years ago? And then we'll talk
Hmm.
about what the idea is. And then maybe I would love to sort of talk about how I think this idea explains a lot of humor that
Yeah,
I had sort of had a running tally. I think for me, at least, humor was sort of one of the big question marks, and I feel like your theory nails it. And then I would love to hear people's thoughts, after we post this about things that might not cover, just to really push on this idea. But I really think um, to be you know, I'm biased, but I really do think this is probably the best idea about what humor is that I've heard. So, but yeah,
Thank you.
how did you birth this idea?
Um, well, like you, I was frustrated that there was not a good evolutionary theory of humor. When I see a juicy Darwinian mystery, something that's unexplained, something that when people ask me about, I just draw blank, like that really, really motivates me. So I had always known that like this was the big blank, the big gap in our evolutionary understanding of human nature that had been unfilled for a very long time. And because I'm kind of an ambitious person, I had always just wanted, I was just really hungry to solve this thing,
Mm.
to figure it out. And I wasn't actively working on it. It was like always in the back of my mind, like what is going on with this huge part of the human experience? There's got to be a good Darwinian explanation for this. I just can't figure it out. And so,
Can I interrupt
every,
really quick
yeah, yeah,
too?
yeah, yeah.
I
Mhm.
think just for everybody listening, and not to sort of like pull rank at all, but like I think you in the Venn diagram of people to figure out at least the next best idea, you are both, in a sense, you are a professional comedian and a professional evolutionary psychologist. I mean, you
Right,
literally
right.
are a professional in both of these domains.
It's true. It was a great Venn diagram of both of my interests. So
Right.
I work on comedy. I work for Cards Against Humanity. I do, data science, like literally figuring out which combinations of cards make people laugh.
Right.
And I've, analyzed that data. And so I'm steeped in comedy both in my professional and in my academic life.
Right.
And so that was another impetus for really, goading me to figure this out.
Right.
Like if I can't figure this out, then this
You're going to be at
all
least a
all is
little
lost.
bit miffed at yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm the person to figure this out.
Good.
I don't
Good
know.
for you.
Maybe that's arrogant of me, but
It's, you got to try, Yeah.
at least I gave it a try.
Yeah.
Well, actually, not even that. It kind of occurred to me by accident. So it wasn't that I was like I sat down to figure it out and I found the solution. It was like I was reading something else, and that just
I see. Yeah.
triggered the idea in me. So
Yeah.
at the time, I forget why I was just like reading about coordination games and common knowledge.
Mm. Light
So
reading, light reading.
yeah, well, so I
I know
I'm
that's what we
also
read. I know. Yeah. Like,
light reading, or sorry, heavy reading, but important reading.
yeah.
And that I think coordination games are one of the biggest, most underrated topics in evolutionary psychology. I think there's not enough work on coordination at all.
Yeah. In
I think it's
coordination,
such.
just because, I mean, obviously we've talked about it before, but it's such a simple but also sort of abstract idea. Can you
Mhm.
just sort of clarify what coordination is? Because it's going to be really important for this whole conversation. So I think it'll be really
Yes.
good to just clarify how you think about it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you can mathematically formalize it
Mm.
as
Oh,
we each have.
we just lost 10 more listeners. Okay.
Okay, so all right,
Yeah.
all right.
And we
I'll
maybe
make it
one
really
one
simple. I
person was
promise.
like, "Oh, yes, give it to me in mathematical formalism." Yes, I'm kidding, but yeah.
Okay. No, this is going to be as simple as possible. I
Okay, good.
promise you'll
Good.
be able to follow it. So let's just start with like a really simple coordination game where I have two options and you have two options. And if we both pick option one, we gain a benefit. And if we both pick option two, we gain a benefit. But if we're mixed up and I go with one and you go with two or vice versa, we pay a cost.
Mm,
That's it. That's the simplest way of describing a coordination game.
I see. So like driving on the side of the road, it doesn't matter which side of the road we drive on, as long as
Yes.
we are both, uh, for lack of a better word, coordinated, we'll be fine.
Yes.
The problem is when we neither of us is coordinated to the point where we're both occupying the same lane, going in different directions, then we're in trouble.
That's right. And so in the case of driving on the same side of the road, you would say that there are two different equilibria in game
Mm,
theory. An equilibrium is sort of an outcome where no player can deviate from the equilibrium or do something different and gain an advantage. So it sort
right.
of stays in that stable state
Right.
because no player can benefit by deviating from it. And
Okay.
so there are two equilibria with driving on the left side or the right side. Coordination games sometimes have multiple equilibria, sometimes they have one equilibrium. It doesn't really matter. The basic, most important part of it is that we both benefit by aligning our behavior in some way.
Right.
And I should emphasize that it doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing the same thing. So if we're
Right.
both talking at the same time, that's bad. You could think of that as a coordination failure. If we're both listening at the same time and sitting in awkward silence, that's also bad. So
I think
coordination
you're
doesn't,
describing our intros. I think you're
I know
describing our
that's, yeah, I
intros.
mean,
Yeah.
we're very
I
bad.
feel very targeted. Yeah.
We're very bad coordination partners. But no, coordination is really hard. It's hard to carry on a smooth conversation with someone, and we often like subtly evaluate like how valuable this person is as a social partner based on how smooth the conversation is and how not awkward it is. And we can get into
Mm.
awkwardness later. I think awkwardness is tied in with this concept of coordination. Um,
Yeah, I'm sure
but
everybody has had this experience of like you just talk to somebody and then afterwards you're like, oh, that went really, really well. Or like
mhm.
you're just having a conversation with somebody and then there's just awkward silence and you're just like, this is, and especially like in a dating context, that's even amplified. But I think even just regular life, it's sort of some people you just kind of, as the kids say, you kind of vibe with, and then some people
Totally.
you're like, what is this? Yeah.
Yeah, you can I think vibing is a way of conveying what it's like to effectively coordinate with someone for mutual
Mm.
benefit. Maybe we should write a paper called A Theory of Vibing, but I think that's basically it.
Okay.
Like we're mutually benefiting and just getting each other and understanding each other, and we're just working together really smoothly. There's no awkwardness, there's no confusion. I think that's ultimately what vibing is like. We're
Right.
part of the same in group, we get the same references and inside jokes. So that's coordination. And so as I said before, sometimes it means, doing the same thing as others, like driving on the same side of the road, but oftentimes it's doing a complementary thing. So, talking while the other listens, listening while the other talks, leading while the other follows, following while the other leads. It doesn't matter so much that the actions are the same. What matters is that they produce a mutual benefit.
Right.
And so this is different from other kinds of games in that they're non-zero sum or they're positive sum.
Right.
So you cannot beat me at passing me in the hallway, for example.
Sounds like a challenge.
Yeah, you cannot beat the other cars on the road by driving in the wrong lane, right? Either all the cars benefit from a safer driving environment, or all the cars lose from a more dangerous driving environment. Either we
Right.
both benefit from having a smooth conversation where we transmit useful information to each other, or we both lose by wasting our time and not communicating anything of value and and bungling the interaction, right? So we're either winning or losing together. That's another important feature of coordination games. And the other really important feature of coordination games is that they often require common knowledge. So common knowledge is a hugely important term in game theory. Uh, I'm grateful that the great Steven Pinker is writing a book on common knowledge. It should be awesome. I think it's a really understudied and hugely important topic. Roughly, common knowledge in the game theoretic sense means that everyone knows something. So if we're going to coordinate for mutual benefit, I need to know what to do in order to gain the mutual benefit, right?
Right.
But I also need to know that you know what to do. Otherwise, I shouldn't do it because you might not do the same thing, right? Or do the complementary thing, which means that I need to know that you know that I know what to do because then I can't count on you to coordinate with me. So we need to know that the other one knows that the other one knows, and so on, what to do in order to work together and smoothly coordinate.
Right. The episode with Michael Moncrief,
Hmm.
Michael Moncrief, hey Michael, is was a lovely example of that, where in
Yes.
the east of the Berlin Wall, was it in Poland or something? It doesn't, the details don't really matter, but it
Hmm.
was this radio free Europe was on, and they told people to flicker their lights in this small village if they're
Hmm.
listening and they're sort of not happy with the current regime. And all of a sudden, all these lights were flickering, and Michael conveyed that, a couple of days later was the beginning of the end of that of the Iron Curtain, basically. And the idea was that there were lots of people maybe who knew other
Hmm.
people who were not happy. Maybe they
Hmm.
were not happy too, but it became a thing of everyone could see that everyone else could see. And so
Right.
this function of sort of, I know that you know that I know, it sounds jargony, but it's this difference between um, understanding, as you put it, that we'll both we both represent that each other are we're both a team and we're going to work together versus
Yeah.
just knowing that we might be just sort of ships maybe usually passing the night, but we just happen to be going in the same direction. But I don't know that you know that I'm doing the same thing. So I can't rely on you to sort
Yeah.
of be my partner, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So with the Moncrief example, we might all have private knowledge that the regime sucks, and we might have private knowledge that other people are unhappy with the regime. But we might not know that other people know that the regime sucks or that we hate the regime. We might not know that other people know that we are dissatisfied. We might not know that they know that we know that they know. Uh,
Right. Right.
that they're dissatisfied. And if we want to mount an effective rebellion or resistance, we need common knowledge. We need to know that if we're going to resist or overthrow the regime, that other people are going to have our backs.
Yeah.
And in order to rally that kind of movement, you need common knowledge.
Yeah. And
And so,
really quick, sorry to interrupt, but I also
yeah.
wonder, just as another callback to a different episode, I also wonder if the loneliness, people feeling lonely, is
Mm,
a lack of feeling like there's common knowledge.
mm,
That would be a really interesting thing to look at, I think. Like, just sort of to what extent do you feel like there's common knowledge in especially in a mass media environment? You're really not getting cues of common knowledge that nobody knows what I think or nobody cares what I think. I wonder
mm.
if a lot of social media or just weird stuff people do online is this sort of weird kludgy attempt to sort of create common knowledge, given that we're sort of getting super stimuli of one-sided, we're getting a lot of inundation about epistemic or information cues, but we're not getting, um, you're not being seen and you're not getting cues of common knowledge.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting hypothesis. I buy that completely. And I think it also ties into your work with groups. I think you need common knowledge to have a group because we
Mm,
all need to know that everyone knows that we're in this group and these people are not in this group. Without
right,
that common knowledge, the whole concept of a group shatters. So you cannot
right,
maintain a group without common knowledge that there is the group. It's a construction of our minds. This group. I mean, there's no intrinsic difference between, say, the Mets and the Yankees or whatever. It's,
yeah,
we've all agreed that everyone else agrees that these are two different groups.
right.
Um,
It's like money. It's just a court. Yeah, it's just,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Yeah. No, that's right. And so a lot of weird, even like moral outrage stuff, and probably a lot of the terrible things people do online, it might be a weird attempt to sort of create that. So if the emotion of lack of sort of common knowledge might be a really interesting research topic.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. That would be cool to look at.
All right.
Um,
Sorry,
so,
digression done. So we've got coordination, common knowledge under our belts into
mhm.
this idea of humor.
Okay. You really cannot overstate the importance of coordination to the human experience. It's the water we swim in, and it's often invisible to us. So, like what we're doing right now is playing a coordination game. Language itself is a massive coordination game where we have all agreed on which sounds correspond to which things in the world. It's
Mm,
kind of an unbelievably complicated coordination game that we're all playing and playing really well. It's phenomenal, like how smoothly we can communicate with each other and transmit subtle, complex ideas and representations from one head to another. It's miraculous when you think about how it works, but it is just a bunch of coordination games. Each word in our language is a coordination game. We have all coordinated on the fact that this word means this thing.
mm,
Dog means the four-legged furry thing with the tail that's cute, right? And so it's in even, culture, conventions, norms, even social status, I think is ultimately in large part a coordination game. We all have to agree on who is high status and who's low status. And everyone has to know that everyone knows who's high status and who's low status. If I'm discoordinated with other people and I don't know who's high status and who's low status, and I suck up to and praise someone who's an nincompoop or a social pariah, or if I insult and casually diss someone who's widely respected and venerated, that's going to be really bad for me and
right,
my social well-being. So I need to coordinate with everyone else on who's at the top, who's at the bottom, who's a good person, who's a bad person. If I'm mixed up with other people, that's going to impose huge costs on me.
right.
So that's a good segue into this idea of a mix-up.
Mm.
So if we're if coordination is the water we swim in, there is a difference between doing it well and doing it poorly. And one of the easiest ways to fail to coordinate is to be mixed up about something. And so the simplest example of this is when we look at the coordination game of language. So we've all agreed that, these sounds correspond to these things, but what about the case of a homonym,
Mm.
where you have a word that's, two words that sound identical and yet mean different things? That those kinds of words are really dangerous. You could think of them as kind of hotspots where mix-ups are likely to occur because they're really easy to confuse. It's really easy to bungle up these two meanings. So that's one example. So I might, say one version of a homonym, and you might hear a different version, and that might cause us to catastrophically miscommunicate in some way. And so you could imagine that being a really strong selection pressure on our communicating collaborative ancestors to avoid those kinds of catastrophic miscommunications and to have mental machinery that can detect them and avoid them and signal when they've occurred so that we can diffuse their costs and continue collaborating in a mutually beneficial way. So homonyms would be one case of a mix-up. You could mix up a high status person with a low status person, as I discussed earlier. You could mix up, the purpose of a rule. You could, confuse the letter of the law for its spirit or the spirit of the law for its letter. You could mix up people. A lot of comedy involves impersonating someone, making it easy to confuse them with the person they're impersonating. Shakespeare played a lot with mistaken identities,
Mm.
and the hilarious consequences that can flow from mistaken identities. I mean, virtually any domain of human endeavor where we coordinate with one another, there's always the possibility of some kind of mix-up. And
Like
so we can,
we bump into each other in the
yeah,
hallway, or
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So trying to pass each other in the hallway is one of the simplest coordination games we could play. We could either, we each have the two choices of either going left or right. And if we go in the same direction, we bump into each other. And if we move in opposite directions, we pass each other and we gain a benefit. And often when we struggle to do that and we dance back and forth trying to pass each other, we laugh.
hmm
And I think
yeah,
that
especially if it's going on for a while. Yeah.
yeah, the longer it goes on, the more costly it is, and the more potentially costly it is if we misinterpret this as a kind of hostile or romantic interaction that
Mm.
could potentially be very costly. And so we need to signal we shouldn't take this seriously. This is just a misunderstanding. And
Mm.
so that's what laughter is signaling. It's diffusing these potential costs and these
Mm.
anticipated costs that could emerge from this failure to coordinate. So we can think about mix-ups in two ways. We can rank them based on how confusable they are, or how tempting they are, or how easy they are to fall prey to. We don't really have an intuitive way, we don't of describing this, but I do think it's really important, like how tempting the mistake is. So, to give the easiest example, homonyms will have higher confusability than any other random pair of words you take from the English lexicon.
Right.
So on the continuum of how easy it is to fall prey to this mix-up, homonyms would be at one extreme end of the continuum, and couch and saxophone would be at another extreme end of the continuum. You're never going to mix up couch and saxophone,
Right.
right? And then
There's an example here of I'm not going to name who it is, but somebody who was trying to speak a different language
mhm,
was describing that they learned the word for hot,
mhm.
and in the language they were learning, hot. There's two versions of hot, and one means sort of temperature hot, the other one means horny. And so this person was like going into taxi cabs in this country and just sort of being like, "How are you doing?" And they were very proud of themselves. They were like getting in the taxi cab and they were just saying like, I'm okay, but I'm really horny today, right? Because it was a hot day, right? So
Yeah.
very, very proudly. And also another linguistic mix-up was somebody was, and both of these are true stories, was somebody was learning Italian. She was German and she was very proud of ordering fish at a counter, but she was insistently saying, "I am a tuna."
Mm.
instead of saying I'd like a tuna. So examples of mix-up linguistically that
Yes.
are actually pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the example I use is I had a friend in college who spoke English as a second language, and
Mm.
he thought that the phrase "hook up with" meant "meet up with," which is kind of an
Mm.
understandable and
Yeah, yeah,
tempting mix-up.
totally.
You
You
can
could you could
understand why
almost
you
you
would,
could almost pull that off if you
yeah,
had enough context clues. Yeah.
right. But then when you say like I hooked up with a bunch of guys at Taco Bell last night,
No,
that could
that's pretty
potentially be,
funny. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and you can think about it like it's kind of an understandable mix-up. It's kind of
Yeah.
tempting, and it's also really costly. Like it would severely damage my reputation if you thought that I had sex with a bunch of men at Taco Bell,
Yeah.
right? Randomly.
Or
So,
not, but yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
Maybe it would
But
increase my standing.
but it's a mix up. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
It's,
exactly.
nevertheless, it is a mix-up,
Yeah.
and you could imagine costs
Yes,
resulting from it, and you would
exactly.
expect natural selection to favor systems for detecting, anticipating, avoiding, and signaling these kinds of mix-ups because they're everywhere, and the potential for them is everywhere.
Mm.
So confusability or temptingness, that's one dimension by which we could look at mix-ups. Um, Mix-ups that are kind of tempting and understandable are going to, I think, be funnier than mix-ups that are not at all confusable or tempting, right?
Yeah. What?
The more tempting they are, the more similar the two interpretations are, the two words are, the two roles are, the two people are, the two substances are, whatever, the funnier it's going to be,
Yeah, and
right?
I think like good humorists then are people who actually will see confusability where people hadn't before. So like an example I
Yes.
love is in the American version of The Office, Steve Carell, at a certain point he's having financial troubles. Um, and he just like turns to the camera and he shouts, "I declare bankruptcy." Right. And it's he declare, he thought it was literally like you just yell bankruptcy. And that's the process of declaring bankruptcy, right? And so it's confusing declare for this, bureaucratic, I'm explaining the humor, which is less funny, which is actually interesting. Um, but
Totally.
but yeah, but I love that example of just like I shouting, I declare bankruptcy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful example. I'm in the process of trying to test some of these ideas empirically, and I'm trying to gather like short jokes that I can like measure people's
Mm,
perceptions of funniness. And I've
right.
been looking through old Mitch Hedberg stuff because I love
Oh
Mitch
yeah,
Hedberg.
Mitch
He
Hedberg. Yeah,
was so funny.
yeah,
The problem with him though is that a lot of his jokes have multiple mix-ups
sure.
layered into them,
Yeah.
including mix-ups about the nature of comedy itself and like what the
Yes.
purpose of a joke is and what comedy
Yes.
should be.
Which is
Um,
really good, and we can get into because I
yeah,
think one
yeah,
thing I love about your theory, and I don't want to get too
yeah.
far ahead, but it also explains Andy Kaufman, which I
Uh-huh.
don't think any theory of humor that I had heard of had encountered. And even I would argue the variability in people thinking Andy Kaufman isn't funny and is
Hmm.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was looking at Mitch Hedberg, and I think also part of it is just his delivery. And we could
Oh
talk
yeah.
about what
Yeah.
what comic timing is
Yeah.
and why comic timing can accentuate the punchline of a joke. But I remember I came across one Mitch Hedberg joke that just it
He's
had
so
me
funny.
he
Yes.
had me
We need
laughing
to
out loud.
link
It
to
was
some Mitch Hedberg. Yes.
so I can do my best
Yeah,
impersonation
yeah.
of
It's
him. It
hard
was
to do. Yeah, it's hard to
I
do this. And
I I I think soccer is a combination. No, sorry, I already screwed it up. So I
take
think
two,
food.
take two.
Take two. I think foosball is a combination of soccer and shish kebabs.
He's something about, I play tennis and I'm pretty good at it, but I'll never be as good as a wall.
Yes, that's
That
another
thing,
great one.
that thing is relentless. Yeah.
Unbelievably funny. And
Yeah.
trying to like deconstruct why it's funny, like they're just so damn tempting, and you never would
Yeah.
have thought. Like once you think about foosball as soccer and shish
Yeah.
kebabs, like you
Yeah.
cannot unsee that. It's like
Yeah.
such a tempting way and such
Yes.
a wrong way of understanding the
Yes.
game of foosball. But like you're
Yes.
just pulled so strongly in that direction once he makes that connection. And the
Yes.
same thing with with tennis. Like it's a really tempting mistake to think of a wall as being good at tennis because it is
It's
good at
really good
tennis.
at it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
And yet
absurd. Yeah.
it's such a huge error, such a
Yeah,
huge mistake
exactly.
to be like
The
depressed
best
that you're
tennis
never
player
gonna.
in the world is this wall. That's really funny, right? Like
It
that's
is,
actually
yeah,
if you were just like, and we reveal the world's best tennis player, and there's a wall, right? Like that's
right.
funny. Yeah.
So to test this empirically, I'm trying to use jokes like that and measure two components. So we already talked about the first component, which was confusability or temptingness. I'm still looking for the best word to describe it because it's kind of unintuitive. So there's that, and then the second component, I think, is costliness, or
Mm,
the size of the mix-up.
right.
And the way I'm starting to think about this is as the discrepancy between the two things that are mixed up, how far apart they are in conceptual space, how misaligned are the two people in their understanding of reality.
Right.
So that's sort of how I'm thinking about the costliness of how the mind would estimate how costly a mix-up is. It seems like a good rule of thumb might be that, the further apart the two things that are being mixed up are, the more costly it should be expected to be.
Yeah.
So if I confuse pretty big with very big, that's not going to be a very costly mix-up in most cases, right?
Right.
But if I confuse very big with very small, that could be a very costly mix-up.
Right.
And so I think
Yeah,
there's
costliness. Yeah, I mean, and it just to
costliness.
like an example of that, like I think, I'll tread carefully with this one, but like I think one probably the funniest thing I've ever seen, and this is partially because of like what I study, is Dave Chappelle has a skit. I think it was on the Chappelle show where it's a blind black man who's a white
Yeah,
supremacist, right?
yeah,
And it's super funny.
hmm
And I think it's exactly because you can't imagine a
yeah,
higher cost
yes,
mix up, right? Than
yeah,
being not being aware of what you are. He actually, I listened to a video. Dave Chappelle actually mentioned his idea came from a family member of his who was actually lighter skinned and passed as white.
hmm
And actually, I think it was his uncle or
hmm
somebody. And so that idea of sort of mixing up your racial identity
hmm
and the high cost social consequences that follow,
yep,
that struck him as funny. And I think that validate. I mean, that's a really nice example of the intensity of the humor is
hmm
driven by the costliness, and I think people sort of like professional comedians kind of intuitively get this. So
yeah, totally. You cannot imagine a more costly mix-up than mixing up an in-group member for an out-group member,
right, who
particularly
are like
when there is, yeah,
violently, yes,
yes,
exactly, and you're like going to the meetings, right, and
yeah,
it's just like
totally.
yeah, exactly. Is like yeah, you cannot imagine, as you said, a more a higher cost mix up. Yeah.
Yeah. Another good example of a costly mix-up is from the movie Rat Race. I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
So in the movie, so John Lovitz plays a Jewish father with his Jewish family, and he's trying to race to get to the money. I guess the premise of the movie. They're all
Mm.
racing to get to this bag of money, and his daughter is getting increasingly petulant and really wants to pull over and do something, and she sees a sign for the Barbie Museum. She says, "Please, please, can we go to the Barbie Museum?" And finally, he caves. Okay, we'll go to the Barbie Museum. And they go in, and this is the first of many mix-ups, where the Barbie Museum is not about the doll, but about the Nazi war criminal Klaus Barbie,
Right. Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
which is a really catastrophic mix-up
Yeah.
for a Jewish family. And it turns out to
Right.
be an anti-Semitic museum, and there are like neo-Nazi thugs there
Right.
trying to
Yeah.
sniff them
No.
out.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and then but this is just the first of many mix-ups.
Oh
So
man.
they flee the museum in like one of the cars they just get in the car and like flee the museum.
Yeah.
And it turns out that it's implausibly none other than Hitler's car that they
Right. Of
discover as
course.
they're on the
Right.
road.
Exactly.
And then the husband and wife are bickering over whether or not it's appropriate for her to like put on Ava Braun's lipstick because it was in
Right.
the glove compartment, and they're like fighting over whether she should put on the lipstick, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
the dark lipstick gets smeared on the top of the steering wheel, and
Right.
then the Nazi thugs catch up with them, and there's a car chase, and he veers off the road and crashes into this like outdoor convention, and the cigarette lighter flies into his throat, and it's caught in his throat, and he
Right.
slams his face on the steering
Of
wheel,
course.
and the
Yep.
lipstick
Of course. Yep.
uh,
Long,
he gets
long walk to
a
that. Yeah.
dark
Exactly.
impression on his
Yep.
lip,
Yep.
where the reminiscent of a Hitler mustache.
Yep.
So he gets out of the car and he finds a podium and he starts like slamming the podium, and like but because the cigarette lighter is still in his throat, he can't talk, and so like what's coming out of his mouth is like a garbled gibberish
Right.
that's it's like vaguely reminiscent of a German accent, and he's like
Right.
pounding the
Right.
podium like And
Yeah.
then the camera zooms out and it's a convention for World War II veterans.
Yeah, no,
And
exactly. So yeah, that's
uh,
just yeah,
so
bumbling through costly mix
yeah,
after costly
yeah.
mix. Yeah.
Like this, I think of this as like a supernormal stimulus.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yes.
could not, like in ancestral environments, you could not have engineered a
That's right.
situation
Yeah.
like this, a mix up this
Hmm.
costly and
Yeah.
like this tempting.
Right.
Like, so I think of it as analogous to like fast
Yeah.
food.
Yeah. That's
It's
great. Yeah,
just,
yeah. You would be like if aliens were like, I don't know, what makes the humans laugh? This would
yeah.
describe it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like maximum temptingness. Like he looks just like Hitler. He's got the mustache. He's pounding the podium. He's got Hitler's car right behind him. And then maximum costliness. He's at a convention for elderly World War II veterans. One of them even like takes out a gun and aims it
Right. Right.
and then they flee again in another vehicle. And like the
Yeah.
movie is full of these kinds of really implausible, but hilarious, mix-ups of extreme magnitude. I
Right.
remember. I saw the movie in a packed theater, and the John Lovitz Hitler mix-up elicited the by far the loudest laughter I
Right.
had ever witnessed in a movie-going audience. Like the
Yeah.
entire theater was just absolutely uproarious.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the movie has aged well or not, and we could talk about why comedy doesn't age as well as other
Yeah.
genres of
Yeah,
art.
that's a really interesting thing. Yeah, watching stand up from like the 60s or 70s. I mean, some of it is evergreen, and I think some people were explicitly like trying to be evergreen. But yeah, some stuff does not hold up for sure.
Mm,
And that's an interesting, maybe, yeah, we can circle back to that. So
yeah, for sure.
costliness, confusability.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm in the middle of trying to test to just basically see if we can predict funniness by measuring the costliness and measuring the confusability. And so far, just from some preliminary data, it's looking like just temptingness alone is explaining a good chunk of the variance in funniness. It's like 20 to
Right.
30% of the
Right.
variance just from the measuring how tempting the mix up is. So I think we're on the right track, and now I got to figure out how to measure costliness. Um, but yeah, that would be the next step.
Cool. And
Yeah.
then, so that's that part. But then, why humor? Like, what's the
Hmm.
selection pressure for it? So those are the two things.
Yeah.
What's up with why does that exist? Why would there be selection for it? Or is it a byproduct of some, like, what is it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I think it's an adaptation. I think there were strong selection pressures to develop a sense of humor, because the benefits of it were so great in our highly socially interdependent cooperative species. And so you can think about those two components, confusability and costliness, as basically just combining to map out to the expected costs of failing to coordinate with others.
Right.
So, the confusability you could think of as the likelihood of the cost being incurred, and the cost is just the magnitude of the cost incurred. And so it's pretty straightforward logic. The bigger those two things are, the bigger the benefit from avoiding it, right?
Right.
The
Right.
bigger the benefit from anticipating it in advance and avoiding it. And the bigger the benefit of signaling it to other people and creating common knowledge of it to
Mm.
diffuse the costs of it
I
if
see.
if
So
and when it does occur.
signaling and common knowledge of the mixability. So it's the selection pressures or the lack of coordination or the mistake that you would make.
Hmm.
The mixing something up, and then the point of doing this thing of finding something funny and producing whatever we do, this weird thing we do.
Hmm.
Um, that's a signal of. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. The way I map it out is by dividing it into two parts. So I think the first part of the evolution of humor is just the evolution of the sense of humor,
Mm,
just the ability to detect and anticipate and avoid mix-ups. That's just the sense part. You can think of that, leave laughter out of the picture.
right, right.
It's straightforwardly adaptive, beneficial, fitness enhancing to be able to detect, avoid, and anticipate mix-ups.
I
Right.
see. So
So that's
like
just
it's
the
sort of
first selection.
intrinsically pleasurable, just to make sure I understand it. So the idea is
Yeah.
almost like it's in the same way it's intrinsically pleasurable to sort of like discover something that might be fitness promoting, like a new friendship or
Hmm.
a group that you never knew existed, or like a lovely place to visit, or like your home
Hmm.
is nicer than you expected.
Yeah.
Or the idea is that to see confusability, costly discoordination or confusability ahead of time, because doing that avoids the the error. It's sort of like a caution tape around a hidden hole. It's
Exactly.
intrinsically pleasurable because exactly it's a rewarding thing because it's a signal of you've avoided a cost.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That's a great way of putting it.
All right.
So that's the first stage. And so I tried to model this mathematically. And so straightforwardly, you can just show that, having the ability to detect and avoid these mix-ups helps you, avoid the costs of coordination failure, reap the benefits of better coordination. And these costs and benefits will loom larger when interactions are longer, and the potential to continue reaping those benefits or continue incurring those costs is larger. So if we spend a longer time dancing back and forth in the hallway, then we're going to incur more costs if we fail to detect the mix-up. And if we interact with each other a lot, and it's really important that we understand what we're thinking and feeling, then the benefits of coordinating are going to be higher. So the first part is just evolving that sense. And I really do think it's analogous to a sense like seeing or hearing. I think we're scanning the social world for coordination opportunities, and we're picking up on these hot spots, these tempting, confusable areas that could potentially be costly for us
Mm,
socially. And so the first part is sensing. And the second part is, even if you're the best humor sensor in the world and you never get into mix-ups, you're always anticipating them in advance, or if a mix-up does occur, you immediately spot it, and you switch to whatever the alternative behavior was. So if
mm,
we're mixing up our meanings of the phrase hook up with, and I say, I hooked up with a bunch of guys at Taco Bell, and I see that a weird expression on your face, and I instantly realize that, oh, there was a mix up involving this meaning. I'm going to switch to the other meaning of
right.
hook up with. Now I know what it means, and we'll continue coordinating successfully.
Right.
Even if I have sensed it and have avoided it in future interactions with you, there's still that initial cost that I paid,
Right.
or that we paid, because you mistook what I did, right? You
Right.
thought that I had sex with random people.
Right.
So even if I avoid that mix up in subsequent interactions with you, that initial cost is still going to be there. And
Right.
so that brings us to the second stage of the evolution of humor, which is laughter. So how do we erase that initial cost? How do we create common knowledge that you're no longer going to view me as a weirdo who has sex with random guys in public places, right? How do we establish common knowledge that we know, that the other knows, that the other knows, that this was just a misunderstanding. We're not going to take this communication seriously. We're not going to treat it as actual communication, and we're going to just forget about it, no harm, no foul,
I
and
see.
move on.
So you're telling me that you know that it was a mix-up and that
Hmm.
you see that there was a cost,
Hmm.
and I know it was a mix-up and I know there was a cost,
Hmm.
and we're getting into the logic of how laughter allows both of us to have common knowledge that we both represent that there
Yeah.
was a mix-up and there was a cost.
Exactly. And it needs to be shared too, because if I'm laughing at it and you're not laughing with me, then that's a problem. You might not know that there was a
Mm,
mix-up. So we need to
right,
be laughing together to
right,
establish common knowledge.
right.
So we
Right.
both,
So if I didn't laugh,
yeah.
it would and we'll keep going. But like, yeah, that means something to you.
Hmm.
And it means
Yeah.
something about what I am changing about my representation of you. Right.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
And if
Yeah.
you don't
So
share the laughter, I might think that you think that I'm a weirdo, and then
right,
that lowers the benefits of cooperating with you, for me,
right.
right?
Or I think
Uh,
hooking
yeah.
up is means meeting up with people, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it could, yeah, but there's some inference about why I'm
Hmm.
not laughing, or yeah, or like I'm your enemy,
Hmm.
and so I reject the laughter because the work that the laughter is doing is reparative for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, you might not want to diffuse those costs. If you're my rival, you might enjoy me being embarrassed or devalued by others, and you might try to resist the laughter.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I think
um,
one of the ways people show a low status, low power person is somebody who laughs a lot,
hmm
and the people around them are not laughing with them.
Yeah, it's a person who thinks that they're, constantly struggling to coordinate with people or is aware that they're struggling to coordinate with people
Right.
and they're trying to repair those failures and
Right.
people just aren't accepting the bid to repair those failures
Right.
because they're just seen as a low value partner.
Right. And I think if you do look at people, like I think people even kind of intuitively know this. So like I've seen
Hmm.
people just sort of act like if you get an actor, for example, who's pretty
Mm,
good and just pretends to be like lower status or meek or
yeah.
whatever, it's this kind of like constant laughter. And it's a different kind than, I mean, obviously there's sort of taxonomies of there can be biting humor where people are
Hmm.
very, they're using it in a way that's the opposite, where it's sort of like attacking other people's status. But there is this version of sort of, you're exactly right, of like kind of laughing at themselves.
Yeah, totally. And this is a good way to segue into what I think is the third part of the model, which is identifying others' sense of humor
Mm,
and preferentially affiliating with people with better senses of humor, who get your jokes, who laugh at the things that you laugh, who laugh at the same things, right? Who you laugh with instead of at.
right.
So if you have a really good sense of humor, if you're good at telling jokes, which signals that you're good at spotting and anticipating and avoiding mix-ups, well, that means that the benefits of coordinating with you are going to be higher than coordinating with some other buffoon, right? Because you're going to be better able to avoid those mix-ups. We're going to cooperate more smoothly. We're going to vibe more. And so
Mm,
you're a better coordination partner if you have a better sense of humor. Whereas if you're a buffoon, a fool, an idiot, we're going to get into so many different kinds of misunderstandings. We're going to struggle to vibe and to work together,
mm,
and that's just a very low value social partner for me. And I should want to avoid them and preferentially affiliate with the smooth, funny, witty people who are good at coordinating and good at getting the prevailing social norms and conventions. And so I think that is what is involved in the art of joke telling or being a funny person and why we find funny people attractive. It shows that they're really good at coordinating. They understand the culture that they live in. They're good at culture. They're good at
mm,
communication. And we want to coordinate with those people because the long run payoffs of coordinating with them are going to be higher, with fewer mix-ups uh, uh, over time, than coordinating with someone else.
right. That's really interesting. I wonder too, like, people often talk about, in their friends or in their mates, they want somebody who's funny and
Hmm.
smart.
Yep.
Um, and I wonder, like, if part of that, it's two things. One is that um, there's sort of like right at what's on the edge of your thinking or confusability. And
Hmm.
so if somebody is discovering confusability that you hadn't thought of,
Mm.
um, it's sort of there's an arms race where there's always somebody who's sort of it's showing that they're in this competitive thing of sort of I'm not being very articulate about it, but basically it's a there's never enough. So like what's something if you found something very easily confusable to the
Hmm.
point that it's trivial,
Yeah.
if you might not find that funny, but if I do, it sort
Hmm.
of means that we're whatever quote unquote like,
Yes.
intelligence means, which is just a difference. It's not like a mechanism. It's not,
Hmm. Yeah.
but it teases apart. Oh, if somebody is like picking out stuff that I hadn't thought of, that's they're spending time, they're valuable. There's sort of some cognitive resource there that's
Yeah.
interesting. It also, though, shows like what you care about and what your interests are. And to
Yes.
whatever extent, like everybody is sort of like occupying different status games, right? Or
Hmm.
like you're
Yep.
just pursuing a thing. So if I make a joke of, I don't know, about sports for you, David,
Yeah.
and like, I sit down and I'm like, well, this thing, and it involves like a confusion about sports, you might like not laugh.
Hmm.
In the fact that I think it was the right joke to tell you, you'd just be like, well, you don't know me. I don't care about
Hmm.
sports. And so it's sort of a way to sort of filter people. Humor attempts are a way to filter people by like what what status scheme we're all going to coordinate on. And
Yep.
so that would be another like I think those would be two things. And there's a lot of use of humor, right? Like I mean,
Yeah.
people are using humor all the time.
Yep.
Um, so that was really not funny 2 points, but that's my 2 points. Yeah.
No, no, I totally buy that. So this ties into Flamson and Barrett's encryption theory of humor,
Mm,
which is really complementary with my approach. And the idea there is was basically what you were getting at, which is when you tell a joke, what you're doing is you're encrypting a piece of information that can only be decrypted by people who share your background knowledge and
Right.
your cultural knowledge.
Right.
So if I'm going to, tell a story about a mix-up, or simulate or role play a mix-up in a specific kind of coordination game, the only people who are going to pick up on that are going to be the people who are playing that same coordination game, or who share my knowledge about what it means to be mixed up. And so that's going to be a great way of differentiating people who are in my subculture from people who are not.
Right.
And what's great about it is that I can do it covertly. So if I tell a joke and you get it, but someone else doesn't, that allows us to affiliate with one another and exclude that third person without overtly telling the third person, I don't like you, go away.
Right.
Which could potentially be costly, because then that could develop, animosity, resentment, and so forth.
Right.
And so it evolves us, it allows us to sort of exclude people and hobnob with other like-minded people without making it overt, or offensive or common
Right.
knowledge.
Right. Like a lame example of this, like let's imagine, and apologies to anybody named Josh, but
Hmm.
maybe I should use a different name because we should
Yeah.
have Josh Timer on. But let's assume
Yeah.
like somebody named Josh is a jerk and we both know Josh is a jerk. And then like somebody
Yeah.
comes up and I basically am like, oh, Josh, like I just say basically Josh, right? And it's a signal
Hmm.
to you that this person's a jerk,
Hmm.
but the person doesn't know. Like you could
Hmm.
imagine, it's kind of it's sort of sophomoric, but like I think a
Hmm.
lot of times, even just thinking about like when I was like in my teens, groups of kids, you just sort of like allude to past things. Like you would
Hmm.
even just words, you would just sort of say like stupid nonsense words, but you would just sort of repeat them when it was roughly appropriate, and kids would just laugh, right? Like just the
Yeah.
funny made up word you made,
Hmm.
and so it's almost like it's picking out this point of coordination that other people wouldn't know, but somehow it's
Yeah.
amusing. I don't know if it reaches the point of funny, but yeah.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah, the gibberish words, that's an interesting case. It could be that sometimes the humor comes from its similarity to another word,
Right.
um, or even another word that you maybe shouldn't say.
Right.
That could be part of it. Another part of it is just there's such a strong expectation that when we open our mouths and put phonemes together,
Yeah.
that we're going to be providing valuable information. We're going to be communicating
Right.
something of
Right.
relevance.
Right.
And the more we violate that social convention and are mixed up about the purpose of opening our mouths and putting
Yeah.
phonemes together,
Yeah.
the more costly that could be.
Yeah.
Confusing the purpose of talking with flapping our mouths
Right.
is a kind of tempting mix up. If if you
Yeah.
don't speak a language, it might seem like they're just flapping their mouths.
Right.
And when you
Right.
try to imitate that, that could be a pretty costly and tempting mix up. So maybe
Yeah.
that's what's going on there. I'm not
Yeah, yeah.
sure.
I mean, like even just because I have a a preschool age at home, and like even just like on the playground, just like kids running around, just like yelling like something like donk, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
just making up a word, but
Yeah.
and the fact that they all start doing it and they just
Yeah.
laugh when they're doing
Yeah.
it, like they're
Yeah.
playing with language, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that's to the costly thing is like around this age, things like that are related to like disgust, like poop, are really
Hmm.
just intrinsically funny, right? Like the
Totally.
funniest thing is
Yeah.
like pretending like this ball I'm gonna throw at you is like poop, and it's just
Hmm.
hilarious, right? Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, there's really
scatological humor.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, scatological. I mean, there's really interesting developmental hypotheses you could make. So I would
right,
expect, toddlers who are learning how to potty train and learning the norms and conventions surrounding poop and bodily waste. Like, it's really important that they're learning this stuff and they learn it
right,
really well. And
right.
these are all coordination games we're playing about how to deal with poop, how to talk about it, and uh, in the critical period, the developmental period where we're learning about this stuff, we should find mix-ups
Mm,
relating to it especially valuable and rewarding,
right,
right? Because we're gaining important pieces of information about what not to do, how
right,
not to deal with poop, right?
right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there's
and
a
similar,
really oh sorry, go ahead. Yeah, there's a
and
really
you,
interesting thing that's funny.
yeah,
Because we discoordinated. There's we haven't had Daniel Schnitzler on yet either, but like the idea of self-conscious emotions.
mm-hmm,
Like David, we're both parents, and I'm really aware of the self-conscious emotions being things like guilt, shame, pride, where it's sort
hmm.
of my emotions are in anticipation of how others will think of me, right?
Hmm.
So if I do
Yes.
something, like if I walk around and I've got toilet paper stuck to my pants and I'm walking
Hmm.
around work, that's not actually that costly personally for me. Like,
Hmm.
I'm like less
Yeah.
aerodynamic, but like who cares?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but people will look at it and think, oh, that's gross, or like think I'm
Uh-huh.
weird. And
Yeah.
so the emotional reaction isn't about the consequences for you, but it's an anticipation of how others will respond to you. And there's a really interesting developmental thing too, where sort of some self-conscious emotions sort of come online, or what counts as costly. Like nobody's going to laugh at a baby for pooping, right? And like babies
Hmm.
don't care that they have poop all over them, right?
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like but that's very different by the time you are an adult, and somewhere in
Yeah.
between that, different content is becoming entrained into or turned on into what are the relevant self-conscious emotional contents, right? And I think
Yeah.
that also I think would make predictions about if humor what humor content should be related to these self-conscious emotions too, because the self-conscious emotions are about the costs and benefits of if you do something
Hmm.
and you lose status, or people think worse of you.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to transition into embarrassment.
Mm,
So I think the theory has some really interesting implications on what embarrassment is and what its adaptive function is. So I think of embarrassment as a close cousin of shame.
mm,
So shame is very simple. Dan Sneezer has studied this, and we're going to have him on soon. I'm excited to talk to him. But shame is just when you're devalued by others, when others think you're a bad social partner, you're mean, you're disgusting, you're selfish, you're dumb, whatever, you're ugly. When you perceive that, you feel shame and you feel motivated to hide that part of yourself and mitigate those costs. Maybe it causes you to defer to other people and try to placate them, to hide, to fear other people excluding you or whatever. You could think of shame as mobilizing a response to being devalued by other people,
mm,
particularly other people that you care about. So embarrassment is not shame. It's not as clearly negative. Sometimes embarrassment can be kind of funny and kind of positive
mm.
depending on how it plays out. So so I think what embarrassment is a kind of mix up in the audience that you're in, or
Mm.
the audience that's observing you, and they are struggling to coordinate on whether or not your status has fallen.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. A really interesting example, just to plug in.
Yeah,
One thing that people find really difficult, because I've worked in working with infants. And when you work with
yeah,
infants, you do like baby talk, where like, hi,
yeah.
look at this. And it's like very weird to do that with adults. And
Hmm.
so people feel embarrassed to show how to interact with an infant to
Hmm.
adults, right?
Mm.
And so it's this thing of like, I'm supposed to do this, but there's part of me that's like, well, this is going to be costly to these people, and you kind of feel embarrassed for the people who are doing it sometimes. I mean, you can push
Mm.
this even harder, where like if you watch like a YouTube video for kids, and the
Hmm.
adults is like really infant directed, you're kind of
Yeah.
like, I feel bad, like I'm embarrassed for you,
Yeah,
and it's yeah,
the guy
exactly,
in the Barney costume who's doing an
exactly,
oafish dance.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
kind of embarrassing.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think what makes it embarrassing is that you're not quite sure whether the person has lost status or whether other people think that the person has lost status or
right,
whether you should start devaluing that person or whether you think other people are going to devalue that person.
right,
It's kind of ambiguous. Like, yeah, they're kind of doing something kind of silly and oafish, but does that mean that they're stupid? It's not quite obvious.
right,
Or like if you have the toilet paper on your foot, like, yeah, it's kind of gross, but like, anyone could have done that. It's kind of an
yeah,
honest mistake.
yeah,
Like, does that mean that, Dave is gross and incompetent, or is it just, a mistake that any of us could have made? Like,
right,
it's kind of ambiguous. It's tempting. Like, you could imagine us making one of two errors. We could all think that everyone else thinks that your status has fallen, or we could think that your status has stayed the same, and everyone else thinks that your status has fallen. And when either way, it's going to be costly because we're going to have disagreement about what
right,
your status is in the
right,
wake of this embarrassing situation.
right.
And often you can have two mix-ups, where you can have one person who has a mix-up or a faux pas, and then that causes the audience to be mixed up about whether to treat that faux pas as a serious transgression or a forgivable mistake.
Right.
So the mix-up itself is funny, and then the audience's mix-up about how to treat that mix-up
Right.
is funny.
Right.
So when the audience clearly devalues you, that's shame. But when the audience ambiguously devalues you and struggles to coordinate on whether your reputation has been damaged, whether your status has fallen, there are different adaptive responses to either of those situations. With shame, the best response is just to hide, placate, try to conceal whatever it is that was damaging to your reputation. With embarrassment, that's not necessarily the best strategy.
Mm.
With embarrassment, you're on this sort of knife edge. On
Mm.
your on the one hand, your status could fall. On the other hand, your status could stay the same, and everyone could
Yeah.
have a good laugh and move
Yeah.
on. And so, when you're embarrassed, the best strategy is to try to tip the scales in favor of your status staying the same,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And there are a number of ways you could try to do that. One way is to laugh yourself, to try in hopes that you might elicit other
Right.
people's laughter. Because if
Right.
we're all laughing together, then we're diffusing the costs, and the costs aren't going to be taken seriously. You're not going to be devalued, and we can all, move on and continue coordinating and cooperating as before.
Yeah.
So I might laugh if I'm embarrassed. Another way to try to tip the scales in favor of my preserved social standing is to signal that I am in fact embarrassed, that I understand that I made a faux pas, I understand that I was mixed up, and that I'm very disinclined to have that happen again. And
Right.
you can count on me to not blunder into that kind of mistake
Right.
again.
Right.
And you could think of that as a really important cue to others that I shouldn't be devalued. Because if I make a mistake or a mix up, on the one hand, that could signal that I'm the type of person that is constantly blundering into these mix-ups, in which case I'm a bad social partner and I should be avoided. But if I make a mix-up and it's not really representative of who I am and my ability to smoothly coordinate, then it's actually it's going to be costly for my audience to devalue me, right? Because it was just a fluke, it was a one-off thing that it's not going to
Right.
happen again. And
Interesting.
so when I'm embarrassed, I should be trying to signal to others that I am embarrassed. I understand there was a mix-up. It's not going to happen again. And blushing may serve the function of allowing everyone to have common knowledge of the
Mm.
embarrassment. Because when
Mm.
I'm blushing, everyone can see that everyone can see that I'm embarrassed. And
Mm.
because blushing is hot, you can feel it yourself. So I know that I'm embarrassed. I know that
Yeah.
others know that I'm
Yeah.
embarrassed, and
Yeah.
I know that others know that I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
And so that signals to other people that I'm aware of the faux pas. It's not going to happen again. And that's another way to sort of tip the scales in favor of preserving my social status.
That's really interesting. And I think like there's this trope, and I think it's right. And we have younger kids, we haven't dealt with this yet, but this sort of like super chronically embarrassed adolescent
Hmm.
who's sort of like really afraid to do anything, and
Hmm.
just constantly embarrassed, or like, Dad, you're embarrassing me in front of my
Yeah.
friends.
Hmm.
And it's exactly when this status game switches to sort of idiosyncratic to your peer group and you're kind of completely divorced from like the status of the prior generation. So I think like, adolescent shyness and
Hmm.
embarrassment, that's just a really interesting thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we can talk about the other side of this, which is what if you fail? What if you fail to tip the scales in
Right,
favor of preserving your social status?
right.
Maybe you laugh, ha ha ha, ha, and nobody shares laughter with you.
Yeah,
Everyone's stone-faced,
yeah,
or maybe everyone's laughing at you,
right.
or maybe everyone's mocking you, and everyone knows that you've really lost social standing, that your reputation has been damaged. In that case, the embarrassment will sour into humiliation.
Right,
And you can think of humiliation as just shame, but it's preceded by some kind of embarrassment.
right.
That it's what happens when the attempt to signal embarrassment and diffuse the costs fails, and you just slip right into shame.
Right. That's really interesting. And I love that what you talked about a second ago was that it can either be a thing of the target of the humor is sort of where the lesson is, or ourselves, like the recipients of it. And this is where
Yeah.
I think, like, I thinking Andy Kaufman is a really great example of doing all these things. So
Hmm.
there's sort of one is where Andy Kaufman gets up and is a really bad comedian,
Hmm.
and he's really not funny. And it's sort of this thing of, well, he's embarrassing himself, right?
Hmm.
But he continues to not be funny, and people start laughing at him because it's an embarrassing thing. He's losing status, and then he's sort of like, "Why are you laughing at me?" And so it becomes
Yeah.
this thing of it's this comment of you're actually harming a person because they're failing to be funny. And
Hmm.
so what he's doing on purpose
Yeah.
is he's pointing out that it's really hurtful to sort of like you're hurting me
Hmm.
by and it's funny, right? Because it's a
Yeah.
mix. He's supposed to
Yeah.
be funny. The other
Yeah.
example of that is he'll be on like a talk show and he'll just be like, I'm gonna contact or my parents are here, and I've never really told them I love them, and I'm just gonna tell them I love them. And it's a really genuine, sincere thing he's doing, but it's not funny, right?
Hmm.
Because or it is funny because he's not like performing, right? He's not
Hmm.
doing a bit.
Yeah.
And you feel like, well, he's an oaf, but then
Hmm.
he's doing this really useful, like important real world thing. And then you sort of think, oh, um, it's horrible that I have the expectation and I'm devaluing him because
Mm.
he's telling his family he loves them.
Mm. Yeah.
And there's all these cues that he knows he's doing it. So, when he's a bad comedian, like at the end in some of his bits, he'll like do an Elvis impression. So it's like it's really hard to do. So he's showing
Mm.
you, I know that I'm being bad, but some
Hmm.
people don't get it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's like Andy Kaufman humor. I think your theory explains it in a way um, where it's sort of like it's the humor of humor, right? Where like what
Oh,
is
totally. Yeah.
right, and I like that about that. But and I think this is also where I've heard people say that like you can kind of couch deep insights in humor in ways that you couldn't otherwise, right? Like there's sort of the court jester who can sort of get
Hmm.
away with making fun of the dictator or the king,
Hmm.
and other
Yeah.
people can't, or like
Hmm.
political humor.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that? Like what's going on with that?
Yeah. So related to this analysis is an emotion that is pretty understudied, which we might call mirth or
Mm,
amusement. Um, and you can think of mirth as functioning to diffuse or nullify the costs of a mix-up. There has to be some machinery in the mind that performs this function of making sure that the costs don't get registered, right? They don't get taken quote unquote seriously. And so, in order to perform this adaptive function, mirth has to deactivate or suppress systems in the head that process costs.
mm,
So it's going to deactivate anger, so you don't get angry at the faux pas. It's going to deactivate fear. So if you're play wrestling, you're not going to be afraid that the person's trying to kill you. It's going to deactivate hatred, so I don't hold a grudge because you tried to fight me or whatever, or you're play fighting with me. It's going to deactivate compassion and guilt. If I'm not going to feel guilty for the fake punch that I threw at you, right?
right.
And so it's going to deactivate all these different negative emotions in order to prevent the costs of the mix-up from being registered. And so if that's the function of mirth, then all of a sudden there's a huge strategic advantage to be gained by exploiting that aspect of
Mm,
mirth.
mm,
So political coalitions mobilize and coordinate by creating common knowledge of costs. The costs of the enemy coming and invading us or dominating us or exploiting us, the costs of us having low status, the costs of being attacked, the costs of unfairness. Politics is all about taking things seriously, and I think of seriousness as basically the ability to register costs. Seriousness is the actual or potential or hypothetical costs that could be inflicted by a situation. I think of
mm,
a serious person as someone who can inflict costs on you, someone who can harm your reputation, who can physically harm you, who can withhold benefits that are really valuable to you, a person whose absence is greatly felt, a person who can withhold valuable information to you. So in the show Succession, Logan Roy tells his children, "You're not serious people," and you can see why that would cut so deep. It's telling his kids that they're incapable of, bargaining with or negotiating with anyone or inflicting any kind of real costs or withholding any kind of real benefits from anyone.
Right.
So I got launched on a sidetrack there. So, seriousness. We need seriousness politically. Politics is about what we should take seriously as a society, right? And if I come into the middle of a political rally or a political protest and I start cracking jokes and activating mirth,
Right.
that's going to throw a huge wrench
Right.
into the political coalition. It's going to prevent them from creating common knowledge of these costs that they need to take seriously. And so mirth is kind of a political weapon. It can really damage one group's ability to mobilize. And so I think that's why humor can be so political. We really have to figure out what stuff we should be allowed to laugh at and what stuff we shouldn't. And if something is really costly and we really need to pay attention to the costs of that so that we can mitigate it, then we should be really reluctant to joke about it because we cannot afford to activate mirth and deactivate the negative emotions that we need to deal with it. And so mirth is a kind of anti-seriousness
Mm.
system that we should be really antagonistic to in serious situations because it prevents us from actually dealing with those serious situations effectively.
Right. So like I'm thinking, so like, and this is also where maybe the content of humor comes in, where, um, I'm thinking like politics, where political humor, where the joke is on our side versus the other side. We're fine
Mm.
with that, but we don't find funny where like we're the victims of the humor.
Yep.
Um, is that sort of similar, or is it just even like across the board humor doesn't? Because I'm thinking, like politicians who are sort of very serious, but then might mock the other side, right?
Mm. Yeah. So I think that's slightly different. I think
Mm.
what's happening there is when you mock someone, you're basically trying to frame them as a bad coordination partner, as someone who's
Mm.
idiotic, foolish, awkward, inept,
I see.
clumsy, someone who's bad to associate with, who's going to
Right.
bring very few, if any, benefits and many costs.
Right.
So I think that is the function of mockery. So once we have this system online where we're evaluating each other's value as a social partner, and in your ability to coordinate smoothly is a really good indicator of your value as a social partner, it behooves me to try to make my rivals look foolish, to look like they're bad social partners, and to make myself look like a good social partner by comparison. And
Right.
so you can think of political competition as attempts to rally people to one side of a political conflict. And one way to get people on your side is to cast the other side as a set of bad social partners. So we
Right.
can do this by making them look mean or cruel or selfish or clumsy or oafish or stupid or idiotic or foolish.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of political satire is about. It's about pointing out the hypocrisies on the other side, the foolishness, the idiocy, and the ways that they're constantly failing to get how the world works, to get how language works, to do things the right ways. I think that's what a lot of political satire is about. And you can think of hypocrisy itself as a kind of dual mix-up. So if we're all trying to collaborate to enforce some rule that benefits everyone, there's a kind of tempting mix-up there. I could think the purpose of the rule is to benefit me but not others, and that I am supposed to enforce the rule but not follow it,
Right.
right? And if I do that, then that could create another mix-up where you think I'm virtuous for enforcing the rule when I'm secretly corrupt for flouting it.
Right.
And so we have these dual mix-ups where I'm confusing the purpose of the rule, where I think
Right.
it's to selfishly benefit me instead of the wider community.
Right.
And there's a mix-up surrounding my virtue, where people think I'm more virtuous than I really am because I'm enforcing the rule, but I'm also flouting it,
Right.
right? And so a lot of political satire, I think, is about pointing out the hypocrisies of the other side
Right.
and accentuating the aspect of the hypocrisy that's the mix-up,
Right.
um, where
Yeah.
where they're just fundamentally morally confused.
That's interesting. And that means that if I find something funny and I laugh at it, then I'm sort of by virtue of its design, and I've heard professional comedians say this, that it's sort of like it's humor is sort of like a direct pipeline to insight, or like
Hmm. Yeah.
accepting something you might not want to talk about explicitly. Because if I laugh at it, I'm sort of acknowledging, if I laugh at the hypocrisy of a politician I like, the fact that I'm
Hmm.
laughing at it means I'm accepting that the hypocrisy exists, that the mix-up
Mm,
is happening, and then I
mm.
even like it's I'm creating, and I'm even like creating common knowledge about it, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort of like this really, it sort of bypasses a lot of the sort of like filters of in the talky parts of our brains, sort of, like where we wouldn't want to like as a narrative accept a premise, but if we find it funny, it's sort of like it's really telling what people find funny.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, um,
Should we
cool.
talk about comic timing?
Please.
I think the three has a cool way of understanding what comic timing is and the
Okay.
art of comedic acting.
Yeah.
So you could think about all the subtle coordination games we play every time we have a conversation. So there's the volume game. I could either talk too loudly and frighten you, or
Yeah.
talk too softly and you won't hear me,
Yeah.
or talk at the right volume and we could successfully, have a conversation, right?
Right.
And they're mix-ups just in terms of the volume of my voice.
Yeah.
And there's the pacing game. If I talk too quickly, then you won't understand what I'm saying. You won't follow me. If I talk too slowly, I might bore you. I might look dim-witted. And so there's the sweet spot where I can't talk too fast, can't talk too slow, right? And then there's the gesture game. If I'm totally motionless and expressionless when I'm talking, then you're going to fail to detect what I'm saying. You're going to fail to detect the emotional undercurrents. You're going to miss what I'm referring to if I'm not pointing to it. But if I am wildly flailing my arms around, or if I'm like contorting my face in exaggerated grimaces, then that's not good either because I could, overstate the magnitude of the emotional undercurrents and mislead you about how excited I am or how angry I am or whatever. I
Right.
might, if I'm flailing my arms, I might hit you and you might mistake that for aggression. So there are mix-ups involving just gesturing and emotional communication and facial expressions. There are mix-ups surrounding proximity. If I stand too close to you, you might interpret that as threatening or romantic. If I stand too far away, you might think that I'm like grossed out by you or afraid of you. And so
Right.
there's the sweet spot where I have to be just right. And if I get it wrong, then we're going to be discoordinated. There's the tone game. If I speak in an overly monotone way, the emotional undercurrents are going to be lost. If I speak in an overly sing-songy way, again, it's going to be exaggerate the emotional undercurrents that might distract you from the words themselves.
Right.
There's the timing game. If I respond too quickly to what you say, I might like accidentally interrupt you, and you might interpret that as hostile,
Right.
right? If I respond too slowly, I might appear like I'm distracted or I'm dim-witted, right? And so there are all these really subtle micro coordination games we play every time we have any kind of conversation or social interaction, right? And these micro mix-ups, this is the toolkit of the comedic actor, right?
Mm.
You could think of Jim Carrey, the exaggerated clownishness, how he contorts his face and
Right.
these crazy facial expressions, and
Yeah.
he's so physical and like his gestures are so temptingly out of sync with like a normal gesture. His facial expressions are just like a little bit too much,
Right.
from he might be too close. He might like put his arm around the Dalai Lama like he's a frat bro,
Right.
uh, or like Charles Grodin, who's just like totally monotone in his voice and his delivery, or you might accentuate the punch of a punchline by sort of being temptingly out of sync with the normal rhythms of a conversation.
Right.
Or you might be smoothly in sync with the normal rhythms of a conversation in a way that allows a whopping absurdity to casually slip out. And that might accentuate, you might create another mix up where there's a mix up between the shock of the information that is being delivered and the nonchalance with which it is being delivered. So I
Right.
think the
Like
theory makes,
Baron Cohen, like Ollie G would be a good example of that. Like very smooth, but then saying outrageous stuff. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so it really is like there's a lot of comedy just simply in the delivery of the joke, apart from the joke
Right.
itself.
Right.
And I think the theory can make really interesting and textured predictions about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I have nothing to say. Yeah. Yeah. Super cool.
Mhm. Cool. I mean, I think that's about it. I mean, there's another thing. One more thing.
Yeah. Please.
Evil laughs. This is another
Um,
thing that
okay.
that occurred to me. Um, the mwahaha of the supervillain.
Yes. Yes.
There's this horror movie called Smile, where it's just all about these people with creepy smiles,
Yeah.
right? And it's
I
like
know.
really
Yeah,
scary.
and just like some people really dislike clowns.
Hmm.
This is something when we were back at the infant lab at Yale, we talked to Kylie Hamlin about, and I think she went on a podcast soon after we were, and was like, somebody asked her because she does the infant morality work, and somebody was asking about like why do people dislike like clowns for some reason,
Hmm.
and like we had
Yeah.
talked about this like a few weeks before, but yeah, no, this idea of like you can't predict um, or it's sort of like it's really like clowns, scary clowns are really scary because there's just like smile affixed to this scary agent, right? Like that's like
Yeah,
extra scary, right?
totally. But
Sorry to
you can
interrupt
be
with
no
scary
worries.
clowns, but
No, I
yeah,
mean you
yeah.
can begin to make sense of why clowns are scary and why smiles can, in some contexts, be scary. Once you understand the adaptive function of mirth.
Mm,
So if the function of mirth is to deactivate emotions that process costs,
right.
then if you're in a
Yeah.
state of mirth, you're going to be a
Yeah.
really menacing and dangerous person.
Right.
So it may deactivate your fear, causing you to, or enabling you to attack other people without any fear of retaliation. It
Right.
may deactivate your empathy. So if you hurt someone, you won't feel their pain, or
Right.
you won't feel guilty. It may make you impossible to threaten or intimidate or deter because you're not going to be able to process the costs that are being threatened. If someone is angry with you, they won't be able to negotiate with you for better treatment
Right.
because such negotiation requires real or hypothetical costs that you'll just be unable to process. Like the Joker. I know Morgan Freeman says in,
Yeah.
in Batman,
Yeah.
the Joker cannot be bought, bartered, or negotiated with,
Yeah.
right? I think
Yeah.
it's because he's in a state of mirth. He can't
Right.
take anything seriously. And there's
Right.
something really scary about that there's nothing you can do to negotiate with or deter a mirthful person. And they're going to feel no emotion. They're going to feel no compunctions about harming you in any
Yeah.
way. It's all a joke. And so there's something really scary about being with someone in a mirthful state and when you're not sharing that mirthful
Yeah,
state.
that's really interesting. There, the Quentin Tarantino Inglourious Bastards. There's the character Christopher Waltz did.
Yeah.
The I think he was an SS officer, and he's just sort of charming and very funny, right?
Hmm.
And it's really scary, and it's
Hmm.
he's really charismatic, and it's really I think it's one of the most insidious characters I've ever seen. And I think it's
Yeah.
exactly, or maybe partially at least, because there's sort of a sense of humor and there's so much sort of sobriety and so cognizant. It's not like you're looking at somebody. I think like what you're saying is like there's a difference between somebody who's about to do something terrible and you can tell they're fighting it within
Hmm.
themselves. Like they're like
Yeah.
terrified, they're shaking, they're
Yeah.
scared
Yeah.
and but they're about to inflict a cost on somebody versus somebody who is like composed,
Yeah.
cool to the point of being slick and laughing, right?
Yeah.
Like if they're doing the same thing and
Yeah.
one of those is much scarier than the other.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Ooh,
So yeah, mirth is menacing.
yeah. Good, good,
I mean,
good book
I mean, I
title.
would rather. I think it's way less scary if someone's mad at you, or even if they're yelling at you, than if someone is mirthful in a hostile way toward you. Because at least
Right,
if they're mad, there's the possibility of negotiating with them, of apologizing, of making amends,
right,
right? Of catering to their demands, of doing something. But with a
right,
mirthful individual, you can't do anything.
right.
They're just
Yeah.
this train that's moving towards you that's insensitive to any costs you could inflict on them.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's sort of a trope of like the crazy person. What are they
Hmm.
doing? Right.
Yeah.
And they're typically laughing
Yeah.
uncontrollably. Like, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
trope and I'm sure it came from somewhere in you. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, exactly. Like there's a the kind of uncontrollable laughter or laughing at the wrong times
Yeah.
or when somebody is like imposing costs on people. Like if
Yeah.
somebody's holding somebody hostage and they're laughing maniacally,
Yeah.
that's super scary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Um,
All right.
so so what's the bottom? Well, one last question then is that, or maybe not last, but um, uh, the the idea of humor is sort of like people being funny sort of feels like I'm just imagining like for example like scientists who I know who are very serious
Hmm.
versus who are very funny.
Hmm.
And if I equate them for like, they're are they serious scientists in this sense of like they're really good scientists,
Hmm.
um, but one person's funny and one isn't.
Hmm.
Like they're some of the best scientists I have ever known are also funny people, and they
Hmm.
will like make be funny about things. I
Hmm.
don't think they're funny about. Well, I don't know. They're not funny about the science, but I don't know, but I'm just sort of thinking out loud, like, what's the, um, it almost feels like the difference for me of like people who are funny versus not, or they're sort of like, they're helping me in a way, or they're affiliative, and I just like them
Hmm.
more than somebody
Yeah.
who's very serious.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, well, there are a number of benefits to affiliating with funny people. I mean, number one, you're going to have an easier time coordinating with them. Number two, they're going to alert you to potentially costly mix-ups that you might have otherwise blundered into. So they're providing you with useful information, a useful kind of service. And number three, they're likely to share a lot of cultural and background knowledge with you. Like if you get their jokes, then you're playing the same status game as them. You have the same beliefs, opinions, norms, values, and so that's signaling that they're a particularly good social partner with you. They're particularly simpatico. So there are a lot of reasons why we're attracted to funny people. And in even in a scientific context, I know we're going to have Dan Sneezer on in a future episode. There's a joke that he tells that I can't stop telling this joke, where he says
Sorry, Daniel,
whenever
we're about to spoiler alert.
we're
Yeah,
spoiling your joke, but I fully credit him with this
take
brilliant
that,
joke.
Daniel.
So every time there's like a gap in the scientific literature, there's uncertainty, or we need
Yeah, yeah,
we need
yeah.
to know more. He always says,
Hmm.
"Well, yeah, more funding is needed."
Yes, exactly. More funding. Yes.
What's great about this joke is so everyone in academia always uses this phrase, more research is needed. And
Yeah,
it's this really like mealy-mouthed, like
yeah,
passive voice
yeah,
way of saying I need money, you know?
yeah.
And
Exactly.
what's funny about the sneezer joke is that he's mixing up the overt with the
Yes,
covert, right?
yes,
Like so overtly you say more research is needed, but
yeah,
covertly you really mean I need more money.
yeah,
And so what's funny is that Sneezer's mixing up the two and he's saying
yes,
more funding is needed.
yes.
Uh, and it's a lovely joke. I always say that whenever.
No, it's really funny. And he even does it like even if people do say more funding is needed, they'll often try to couch it in a way that's sort of like, oh, and I just backed into the corner of I guess it would be good for more funding to exist. It's not
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's not opportunistic and Daniel's just like his nonverbals are sort of like, here's another chance for me to say more funding is needed. Right. So it peels away the pantomime of sort of like, I'm not looking for opportunities where I can ask for more resources. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Um, but yeah, one of the many reasons I like hanging out with Sneezer. Yeah.
yeah, good. Is there anything I should have asked you, David?
Oh, I think we covered just about everything. I mean, we got to mirth, embarrassment, evil laughs. Absurdism. We didn't get to absurdism.
Mm,
One final piece. I'm constantly discovering new implications and new ways of understanding things that I hadn't understood before, but I think
yeah.
I'm starting to understand absurdism a little better. So
So this
the
like
theory,
the urinal is art? Is that absurdism or?
potentially. So the theory entails that we laugh to sort of diffuse and nullify the costs of these of mix-ups that are occurring.
Mm,
But the theory doesn't really entail that we always have to pinpoint exactly what was mixed up with what.
mm,
It's certainly helpful to figure that out, and we often do, but it's not strictly necessary. All that is necessary is that the costs of the mix-up, whatever their source, whatever the cause of them are nullified. And whoever was mixed up just stops doing whatever foolish thing they were doing. Right. So we don't need to know exactly the source of it. We just need to know that someone was mixed up about something. We're going to signal that and we're going to try to diffuse the costs so that they stop doing that foolish thing. And you could think of that as absurdist humor, where you know that something's off, that they're confused about something, you're not quite sure what it is, but you know that there's been a mix-up, and you can laugh to signal that a mix-up has taken place.
Hmm.
There's a great joke from Arrested Development where the attorney thinks that a husband and wife cannot be accused of the same crime,
Right. That's great. I love, yeah,
which is a
Arrested
really
Development. Yeah.
and so it's a mix up with a legal term called spousal testimonial privilege.
Mm.
So it's where a husband cannot be forced to testify against
Right.
his wife,
Right.
which is sort of temptingly similar to a husband and wife cannot be accused of the
Right.
same crime, but
Yeah.
very, very different and very costly to make that mistake. But what's interesting is that even if you have never heard of spousal testimonial privilege, you'd still be on solid ground in inferring that the idiotic lawyer was mixed up about something,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you could just appreciate the absurdity of him having this ridiculous
Right. Right.
this
Right.
belief. So you
Yeah.
don't always need to know exactly what was mixed up with what in
Okay.
order to find the absurdity humorous.
Right.
And so that's the idea there. And my favorite example of absurdity is from the movie Naked Gun 2.5.
Okay.
And the title 2.5 is itself a kind of
Yeah. It's
absurdity. It's
funny.
like a kind
Yeah.
of mix up about how sequel numbers work. Like
Exactly.
you can't have half of
Yes.
a sequel. Um, and what's great is that so it's the opening credits, and usually the opening credits, the purpose of it is to set the tone.
Right.
And it starts with like he's driving down the streets in his police car, and there's like jazzy music playing, and it's setting the tone for a noir film.
Right.
And then the montage transitions to him in his police car driving through a bullfighting arena and then bumping into a series of bumper cars and then
Right.
driving down a bowling lane and knocking down the
Yeah.
pins. And
Yeah.
then it concludes with him emerging from a woman's birth canal.
Right. Yeah.
uh, and you know that like some something is deeply
Yeah.
mixed up
Yeah.
here.
They,
Like
yeah, they mixed a lot of things. Yeah. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
some kind of deep confusion happening. Maybe it's
Yeah.
about, the purpose of an opening credit sequence.
Right.
Maybe they're confused about what kind of genre noir is, or
Yeah.
where police cars are permitted to drive, or how large police cars are, or where they come from.
Right.
Like there's some deep confusion here. You don't need to
Yeah.
know necessarily exactly
Right.
the source of the confusion to just to get that it's funny and to laugh
Yeah, like the
to
Monty
appreciate.
Python Silly Walk would be another
Yeah,
example. Like it's just
yeah,
absurd. I wonder if that's like a category for like there's so much going on. I mean, maybe this is what you're saying.
yeah,
Like there's so much going on here that it's this category of like it's overdetermined what mix-ups are happening,
yeah,
right?
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Really quickly, so why does some humor not age well? So like old
Mm,
comedy from like the 60s or 70s about race or gender stuff.
yeah.
What's up with that?
Yeah. So if humor is about coordination games and mix-ups, and culture itself is just a huge number of coordination games and equilibria that we have coordinated on, well then comedy is going to be culturally relative, right? What counts as a mix-up in one culture is going to be different from what counts as a mix-up in another culture. What counts as a mix-up in one language is obviously going to be different from a mix-up in another language. When we use different sounds to mean different things, there are going to be different sources of confusion, different sources of mix-ups, right? If the grammar is different, you might have different, hotspots of confusion where you misinterpret the meaning of what a person said. So linguistically, you're going to have different cultural differences in terms of like social status and the status games that are being played in the culture, and what is normative, what is permitted, what is forbidden. These things are going to vary culturally, and the politics are going to vary culturally. So what stuff have we agreed to take seriously and to mark as like a no mirth zone, and what stuff are we permitted to laugh about and to joke about? Like that is also culturally relative, and that depends on which political battles are being won by which side. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that comedy ages more poorly than drama, because drama deals with just basic human conflicts. And you can read a play from ancient Athens,
Right.
and still feel moved by the plight of the conflicts that are being experienced. But a comedy from 20 years ago will make you cringe
Right.
because culture changes so quickly. And so I do think the theory predicts a lot of cultural variation in what is considered funny, and it predicts that comedy will age poorly in some cases. There are some universal aspects of comedy that you might be able to predict, like every culture has different social roles relating to gender and age. So like an adult acting like a baby or a
Right.
baby acting like an adult,
Right.
that's a mix-up that's probably going to be culturally universal.
Right. Or
Um,
potty
uh,
humor, yeah,
Potty humor,
scatological
yeah,
or sexual.
yes,
So, yeah, like kind of discuss like the universal things. But so
totally,
like what you're saying is like, so like the idea that like, the doctor is a woman, right? Like
yeah,
that's funny, right? Like, no,
yep,
that's not funny at all. And so
yep,
the idea that like somebody thinks that that's funny because it's a mix up or it violates our expectations, it's depending on a set of expectations that we no longer hold, or if
yep,
somebody held it, we'd be like, dude, that person's like an
yeah,
asshole. Not
totally,
that like that, oh, we're all in on this joke, right? So
yeah, exactly,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. Um, and then what's up with slapstick?
Hmm. This one I have kind of a hard time with.
Mm,
I think I understand most of it. Um, so part of it is just, a lot of physical slapstick involves failures of two people coordinating.
right. Like in the
So if
hall,
we're
bumping into each other
I mean, the hall,
in
yeah,
the hall.
that
Yeah.
would be an example of slapstick where there's like a physical coordination failure between two people. You could think of another example where like if we're passing a basketball back and forth, and we've coordinated on the fact that we're both looking at each other, and then I get distracted by like a pretty woman in the bleachers, and,
I
and the
just
ball
hit
hits
you in the face.
it hits me in the face. Like that would be a
It's pretty funny.
slapstick where
Yeah,
we've
that's
failed
right.
to coordinate on what we're
Yeah.
supposed to be doing when we're
Yeah.
passing the ball back
Especially
and
if you
forth.
don't get hurt. Like I think if you like
Yes.
sprouted blood. I mean, I think there's like
Yeah.
the extreme version where like the Monty Python Holy Grail thing where like blood is spurting, but it's sort of
Hmm.
due to like something like a rabbit, I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah.
I'll let yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
There's
that's
like
the
a
other dimension.
disconnect. There's sort of a
Totally.
disconnect between the infliction and the like what you would expect, like your
Yeah.
slapstick where so yeah, sorry, I'm going kind of getting ahead, but like, for slapstick is the idea that like it's a mix up, like you think the person might be hurt, but they're really not, or they make a mistake physically, but they're still okay. So it's sort of a lower
Yeah.
cost thing. Yeah.
I think that's my hunch about what's going on with
Okay.
slapstick. My hunch is that the funniest kinds of slapstick will be things that really look like the person got seriously hurt, and like you're really tempted to think that they like really hurt themselves, but then you quickly realize that they're okay.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's like this really strong potential for a mix up of, overestimating how seriously the person was injured and like rushing in to like, saw off their leg or whatever to
Right.
amputate, and they're
Right.
totally fine. Like so
Right.
that's a court so every time someone gets injured, we all have to coordinate on how seriously to take this injury and like how severe the injury was, what its magnitude was, what we should do. And there, you could imagine coordination failures surrounding how seriously to take an injury or how badly someone was injured. So if
Right.
someone suddenly drops to the floor very quickly, in most cases, that's because something terrible has happened.
Yeah.
Maybe they got shot, maybe they got hit by a
Yeah.
projectile,
Yeah.
maybe they had like a heart attack, whatever. Like
Yeah.
in most cases, it's going to be really bad. But
Right.
if you see that it was just a banana peel,
Right.
then all of a sudden the mix
Yeah.
up is resolved and you can have a good laugh about it. They're
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And so that might be what's going on.
Yeah.
Another part of it was alluded to in How the Mind Works, Stephen Pinker's book, where it might be that we're coordinating on like what categories to place people in, and
Right.
that we could either think of a person as like a locus of thoughts and feelings and desires, like a locus of consciousness.
Right.
We could use our theory of mind system.
Right.
We've talked about theory
Right.
of mind a lot,
Yeah.
or we could just see them as a hunk of matter obeying the laws of physics,
Right.
right? And it may be that when a person like slips on a banana peel, the frame shifts from viewing them as a locus of consciousness to a physical object, to a hunk of matter,
Right.
that's obeying the law of gravity. And,
Yeah.
and
So
and and the
like,
switch between those two frames
yeah.
could elicit a kind of mix up
Yeah.
detection. Yeah,
Exactly. So if your wife walked in right now and started treating you like a bookshelf where she just started piling
yeah,
books on you and we were
yes,
still trying to still
yeah,
have a conversation, it would kind of be funny because this juxtaposition of like treating you like a device to hold books versus, a,
yes,
a
yes.
sentient talking human being. Yeah.
Right. Or if I'm on the floor, like, wiping something up and she puts her feet on me like I'm a footrest, like,
Exactly. Yes.
yeah. So
Yeah.
there's humor there about like how what frame, how we should treat a person as like a physical object or, a human being. And so that could also be what's going on. So I think there could be
Yeah.
multiple things going on
Yeah, and there's also the
with like,
Looney Tune trope of sort of like, you're like, there's like really aggressive violence, but then it's sort of like silly consequences, right? So it's sort of
yeah,
like you hit somebody over the head with like a mallet, and
yeah,
there's just like like a bump comes up and like little birds, and the
right.
person just
Yeah,
shakes it off. And I don't know if
yeah,
that's like funny or maybe it like, but there's this, yeah, it's sort of funny, or like at least it's sort of treated as like puerile or like infantile or young humor. Like there's an
yeah,
old Simpsons episode where they make films, and like I think Krusty the Clown, who's sort of, the clown who's supposed to, he makes like a really heartfelt movie, like short film, and then it gets edited over to throwing a football into somebody's groin, and everybody's
yeah.
laughing about the football, and it's sort of this take on people's sense of humor. People, it's just the lowest common denominator, lowbrow humor, right? Like slapstick,
Yes,
lowbrow. And
totally.
yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that? Or like, is that
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it reminds me of the joke from Idiocracy, which is a really funny movie I recommend. Where it's a future dystopia where everyone's stupid, and like the highest grossing movie is called Ass, and it's just and it's just 2 hours of an ass that occasionally farts.
right? Yeah,
And like and like the like most popular show is called Ow My Balls.
yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly
You know,
right. Right, exactly. And that's
it's
just the
like the
tagline. Yeah.
yeah.
You just go through your day. Yes. But it is funny, like, right?
It
It's
is,
funny.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Farts are funny. Getting hit in the balls is funny,
yeah.
and it's also like but it's also funny to find that funny. It's like you're mixed up
Right.
about what you should be laughing at, what you should be finding funny, you know?
Yes.
So it's like a
Yes.
mix up layered on top of it.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
you know,
It's very human to find slapstick humor, but I do think your theory explains it more than, for example, like I don't think the cryptic theory of humor would explain the slapstick as well.
mhm.
Like I think the mix up is better at doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And part of it might be with, the comic timing element. So like just moving your body in a rhythmically funny way, it could just be it's subtly violating people's expectations about how your body should be moving or how you should be gesturing.
Right.
There could be mix-ups surrounding that. I'm or even just like music or dancing. Like dancing is a coordination game. You have to
Yeah.
coordinate with the musicians to dance on the
Right.
beat that they're
Right.
setting for you.
So
And when
Elaine Bettis, yeah,
yes,
exactly.
the
Yeah,
Elaine
yeah.
Bennis, yeah,
Exactly.
spasmodic dancing is very
It's
funny.
really funny. Yeah.
She's like
Um,
almost dancing. She's like sort of doing some of the things that
yes.
dancing entails, but but getting some things wildly wrong, and it's very funny.
Yes, I have to say I'm kind of like reluctant to convey this, but I think I should, because I remember I was once sitting in a talk of somebody who was conveying the cryptic theory of humor,
Hmm.
and somebody like very like earnestly and like seriously was like, well, what about slapstick?
Hmm.
And the person thought about it for a second, and they were like, that's not humor.
Hmm.
And we thought that was kind of actually a funny response, right? Like at least they were, but like the idea was like, that's slapstick isn't funny. I mean, so yeah, funny.
That is itself funny.
Exactly. Yes,
The
exactly.
overconfidence of
Yes,
saying something like
exactly.
that.
But
Yeah,
anyway, well, David, thank you. I hope this was a mirth. I feel better. I feel better after
I do.
this
Yeah,
conversation.
for sure.
Whatever cocktail of hormones are caused by talking about or laughing a bit. This was great.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you.
Awesome. I
Yeah.
had a great
Well,
time.
yeah. So stay tuned for the next non-funny episode.
Yeah, or hopefully it will be a little bit funny at times. We'll
Yeah.
maybe make some bad dad jokes.
Or we can just talk about, I'm not even going to talk about ow my balls. We'll cut that out. So, all right, David, thank you so much.
All
That
right.
was great.
Yep.
Okay. But David, we just finished up an episode where you talked for a while. So I'll give you a break and say that if you're listening, please subscribe. Please leave a review. We may start reading our reviews. Also, if you have a suggestion about what we should talk about or who we should have on,
Yes.
we will either take that advice or not. But it only hurts if you only get you get 0% of the things you don't ask for. I don't know if that's the correct way to say that, but that is a coherent way to say it. Is there a different way to say
Yeah.
that?
Ask not and ye shall not receive.
That was a double negative, but isn't there something like you only get, you get
You miss the shots you
don't
don't
take.
take.
Yeah. I hate, can I just say, like, there's just this whole category of like really tepid vanilla quotes. I just hate
Yeah, we should do an episode on quotes where we just
like
read
lame
quotes from
quotes.
quotes.com.
It's,
Yeah,
I
and
do,
just talk about how
why is it so lame? I think,
the
well,
evolutionary psychology of quotes. Maybe we should have a whole episode on
yeah,
that.
that's great.
Why did our cavemen
Mm.
ancestors evolve to take quotes from other
Well,
people?
because if you're painting on a cave, it takes a really long time to write out something longer, but a short quote
Ah,
gives you enough time to go forage and hunt and
mm-hmm.
make sure you're not away so long, and quotes are sexy and you might get some reproductive success.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Science.
And you can
That's
also
where you're submitting this.
sharpen your stick for poking at critters by, the charcoal you're writing your poem with.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks. I'll be here all day. Yeah. And yeah. Good. All right.
All
Well,
right.
anyway, on that note, we're doing good eb psych, and that was a joke in case nobody's clear about it. We were kidding.
Hmm.
That's not good
Yeah.
at evolutionary psychology.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Although seriously, I would love to shit on some quotes
okay,
for
sure.
one
Well, let's
episode.
do that. Okay. All right. Thanks for listening.
Yep.
We'll have the next
Thank you.
episode next Tuesday.